no sign that anyone had ever been here, until I stubbed something up with my boot tip. I knelt and dusted out a piece of broken pottery. The sherd was gray as an oyster shell, its surface neatly pinched into a simple, repetitive design, remains of a broken cookware vessel dating to around the 11th century AD. I set it back and came to all fours, lowered my head and blew across the ground. The pointed teeth of other pieces started to show. I dusted them out with 2 fingers, revealing the broken ring of a corrugated jar. After studying this artifact for a moment, I dusted it back over. When I stood, my eyes were sharper than they had been. If there are broken vessels, I thought, there will be other things. I began discerning shapes around me. 15 feet away was a slumped masonry wall, nearly all of it buried by wind and dust. Next to it, a slight depression no more than 10 feet across sank into the earth, the pit of a circular room, and around it I saw the glint of several sherds from other pots. This had been a prehistoric household, 3 or 4 abutting quarters and storage rooms. Not far away was a bit of flatness in the terrain, where rainwater runs off the cliff, likely a plot once used for growing amaranth, pumpkins, and corn. All the puzzle pieces I could see, I put back together, reconstructing a home for 10 Anasazi, 12 perhaps, an extended family. They cooked with gray pots and lived in circular pit houses. After several hundred years of no one living here, the site had turned to rubble. Wood and mortar roofs had deteriorated and crashed in. Doorways had fallen apart. I walked through these ghostly vestiges, things a person could pass right over and never notice. I glanced up to consider the cliff overhead, and there it was. At first, I saw only a high stack of rocks, obviously set by someone's hand into a crack. As I looked closer, I began to see the concealed outline of a tidy masonry structure that had been tucked behind a leaning flake of cliff. No bigger than a piano bench, it was a small Anasazi storeroom, a chamber known as a granary. Not necessarily for storing grain, it was just as likely a pantry for tools or special items set aside for the future. I immediately started for it, climbing hand over hand up the cliff base, feeling an anxious press of revelation as I ascended ledges and cracks. My breath tasted hot with discovery. I had found a secret. In past travels I had seen many granaries belonging to the Anasazi, but they had all been broken open, emptied by archaeologists, by pot hunters, by erosion, or even perhaps by the residents themselves, returning many centuries later. This one had been built so that no stranger would see it, like an attic accessed through a hidden door. I entered a gap behind a shadowed rock flake, and there I knelt before the structure. It was rectangular, like a cupboard. I touched its face with probing, diagnostic fingers, measuring it with my eyes, 3 feet tall, 2 feet wide, and 3 feet deep. I got up on my haunches and lightly dusted off the granary's flat roof, which was undamaged. I licked my lips, feeling their dry chapp. For some 1,000 years, not a single breeze had entered the space within this chamber, no inkling of light. Residents living below had cached something that to this day had remained untouched. My imagination raced. What tightly woven baskets were here? What painted ceramics? What woven textiles? What stockpile of cobalt blue and honey-colored seed corn left many centuries before the boom of Spanish rifles? With a finger, I traced through dust and fallen rock debris on the granary's roof, where I outlined a rectangular hatch, the way in. I blew off dust, revealing a piece of flagstone mortared into place, used to seal the granary shut. This was no casual find. I'd been looking for this for a long time, traveling untrailed desert for most of my adult life, poking into canyons and caves, hoping to find intact signs of people here long before me. Their presence gave context to my brief life, to my civilization. They were the ticking sound of the clock on the mantel, letting me know that time is truly passing, whole societies rising and falling to a believable rhythm. I had encountered their towering cliff dwellings,